Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to talk about how each type is evil. I'm putting the word evil in quotation marks because I'm questioning how we use the word. I'm not saying there's not evil out there in the world. However, we tend to misapply the word a lot. I think what we consider evil often is really lack of conscious awareness. We don't see how we're being maladaptive and perhaps hurting other people. And it's just a matter of becoming more consciously aware of how we're maladaptive so we become better people. And I think that's a better way to improve than saying, telling ourselves we're evil and beat ourselves over the head about that. It doesn't work that well that way. And so the lesson of this video is twofold because I'm letting you know how your type is maladaptive. And it's, your maladaptiveness comes from your blind spot. You're not consciously aware of how you're maladaptive. The other side is to let other people know how your type is not really evil. So we can see how each of these types, this type is evil for that, this type is evil for that, but it's really their blind spot. So it's coming to awareness of how this is the blind spot of the type. So instead of condemning them as evil, we see how they serve the world in other ways. So what is the blind spot for every type? Um, I'm going to introduce a socionics concept here because every type uses all 8 functions, and socionics does an incredible job of letting you know how you use all 8. So there's functions in the shadow. So MBTI, what the MBTI considers a shadow functions, that socionics has a lot to say about these functions. So your inferior function in the MBTI is it's weak, but it's still valued. So the MBTI theorists, they do an incredible job of showing how the inferior could come off in malicious ways. However, um, still, we still aspire towards inferior. We still aspire towards it. We still see intrinsic worth. So we have kind of like hope in that kind of function. And but what socionics does a good job is see which function is not only weak but unvalued. So this is deep in the shadow, and it shows you the weakest function in the shadow that is unvalued. So it becomes our blind spot because we don't see the value of it at all. We just think that it's not worth our time, and thus, well, other types it's worth their time, and they see the worth of it. So we kind of act maladaptively because we don't take that blind spot into consideration. So what is the blind spot function of every type? So this is called the polar function in socionics. So these are your types, and the second row tells us what makes us maladaptive. Essentially, this is the polar function. This is the blind spot of every type. I brought the second function into play too because the second function, um, in the Myers-Briggs and Socionics, which we're very familiar with. So for ESXJs, that's SI, EXFPs, that's FI, so on. We're very familiar with this. We could actually be kind of manipulative through our second function because it's not turned off by the blind spot. So this is the blind spot function. In Socionics, when your blind spot function is on, your secondary function is turned off. When your secondary function is turned on, your blind spot function is turned off. SI turns off NI, NI turns off SI, FI turns off TI, TI turns off FI. The thing is, since these functions is your blind spot, it's your blind spot, therefore it's often turned off. And thus, our second function can run amok. A lot of MBTI theorists talk about how you can develop your second function in order to get out of your loop, and it's great advice. It's excellent. I think it works very well. I'm saying that everything's about balance. So there's ways in which your second function could be maladaptive. So without further ado, I'll talk about how each type is maladaptive. and not evil. So ESxJs, how are they? How does this manifest? They have SI polar. They have NI polar. They have NI polar, so they can't see into the future. They have trouble seeing in the future. They completely are plugged into the now because of their SI. Their SI runs amok and they completely plug into now. They don't see the consequences of their actions. And other types are going to wonder why can't they see the consequences of their actions at all. It's because it's a blind spot. So ISTJs and ISFJs, they have SI first, but they could still use NI much better, and they could see the consequences. But for ESTJs and ESFJs, they can really hold to the SI status quo even when it's going to cause problems in the future. So it's important to recognize how these types still serve the world in other ways, and every type has a blind spot. So next one is ESFPs and ENFPs. So they have FI, they have TI as their blind spot, and FI as a creative. So what this means is that their TI is turned off and their FI runs amok. They could be really selfish. They could be very, very selfish. They make special exceptions for themselves. A lot of them could go through life and they do things for themselves. They think about themselves. If you look at INFPs and ISFPs, we have FI primary, and we have, but we don't have TI polar. So the thing is, what does TI do? TI creates logical rules that creates a sense of fairness. So that's why INTPs and ISTPs can be very fair, because they follow these rules of fairness that applies to everyone. So the next one is ISFPs and ISTPs. They have NE polar. NE is their blind spot. And they have SC as their creative secondary function. So what does this mean? They have trouble with ambiguity, so they could have rather black and white views of things. They can't tolerate uncertainty, so they run into problems in their life because life is, there's uncertainties in life, and they can't deal with it. They can't deal with it. They can't tolerate the sense of ambiguity that other types are able to deal with more. They can have very black and white views. INTPs and INFPs. So that's us. So we have the other way around. We have SE as our blind spot and NE as our creative. How does this manifest? So NE has to do a lot with creating the best of possible worlds. However, we have SE polar, so we don't think about how it could impact society. So we create these very idealized systems or worlds, like these utopias, that have no freaking impact on society. It doesn't make anything better. But we're very insistent on this abstraction. And we don't think about how we could impact the world favorably, and thus we could actually cause problems, because we actually could hold back people from being impactful, because we say, we keep pointing to this very idealized system or world. And whereas if you look at ENTPs and ENFPs, they are NE primary, but they still feel beholden to SC, so they're more likely to do this, see the need for impact, creating an impact, which is quite noticeable. Next one is EXTPs, ENFPs and ENTPs. They have FI as their blind spot. So since that's their blind spot, FI is my primary function, so it's easy for me to see how they're evil, but that's actually my very narrow-minded point of view. So they don't seem to have personal values. They treat things with total reverence, lack of respect. Nothing is sacred to them, which actually could be a good thing. It's actually a way they serve society, because there's a way they could serve society. But they could really carry this too far to the point of that they're psychopathic and opportunistic because they don't have any personal values. They operate with this cold TI. So the next one is ENFPs and ENFJs and ENTJs. They have SI as their blind spot. They're not aware of people's needs for comfort. They're not aware of enjoyment in life in a way of, because SI is the bread and butter of life. Being able to enjoy life day to day. They're so focused on NI, this big grand vision, but they don't see the need for SI, and that could cause problems for their loved ones and themselves because they're so like kind of intense in a way, and it could lead to ill health because they're just so focused on this NI vision. So next one's INTJs and ISFJs. They have FB as their blind spot and T as the creative. So how this manifests is that they are the Grinch of Christmas. They take away everything that is fun because they don't see the point in this exuberant mood. You've seen the Apple fall like Times Square and Times Square, right? And they don't see the point of all this celebration, and as a result, and they don't pay much compliments to people as they could. As a result, they don't. The thing is, it's because they have TE as their creative. They don't see any productivity to this. However, FE is important for keeping everyone together and keeping people's spirits up. But they could have trouble seeing that. And it's important to recognize it's their blind spot and they're not aware of it. So the last one is ISFJs and INFJs. They have TE polar as their blind spot and FE as their creative. So how this manifests is that INFJs, they pull shit out of their ass, which is great because they trust their own insight. They don't trust external sources of information. And that could be a good thing, but it could go too far in the sense that they never check that and they come up with these theories that don't, total conspiracy. And ISFJs are similar in a way that they trust their own personal hands-on experience and those of others with hands-on experience. They don't trust external sources of information. How this can make them evil, and it doesn't make them evil, but the thing is that these two types could be very clever. INFJs and ISFJs could be very, very clever people because TE is very straightforward and honest. It gets from point A to point B very honestly. It's like, doop. FE is, it does all these clever maneuverings with people, and it can make them kind of malicious, but actually kind of cool because they're actually very intelligent because I see, wow, that's actually pretty impressive. And it's also how they serve society. So they serve society by doing this because TE could be not good, and it could be a great thing, but it's important. It's just important for every type to recognize they take it too far. They could take it too far if they ignore their blind spot. And I think my next video I'm going to talk about how you could overcome your lack of awareness of your blind spot in order to become healthier. And there's a way to do it. You can't force yourself to embody your blind spot function. That'll be really neurotic. So I'm going to talk about in another video of how you could improve in a healthy way. Thank you. And happy holidays.